The Lord of the Rings of Power is finally here, and because we've seen so many articles and reviews posting that it is such a great show, it is beautiful, it is diverse, it is changing the world of fantasy, there's been just so much positives going on about it that it must be really good, right? I mean, with a budget of nearly 500 million for the first season, you just can't expect anything else than pure gold. So let's delve right into it. The episode basically starts off with Galadriel making a paper boat and being bullied by some kids. She uses her magic to transform this boat into a swan, a beautiful swan that pops open, but of course the kids don't like that and they start throwing rocks at it. So it is clear that not all is well in the realm of Valinor because Galadriel is a girl that's being bullied for making a paper boat. Because her boat sinks, she attacks the kids who did it, and luckily for them, they are saved by Finrod, who then takes Galadriel away to talk about her, um, about, stones, why they sink, and ships, why they float. Apparently, it's because stones look down to the darkness and ships look up to the stars. Basically, that's the reason why ships float. It's a, kind of a weird conversation. But, anyways, we see luckily the two trees. I mean, was expecting it because it was in the teaser. But this is really a beautiful shot of the two trees, Laurel and Telperion, near the city of Valmar in Valinor. And this is narrated by the older Galadriel, saying that there was light even before there were a sun and moon. And of course, this represents the two trees. And then follows a beautiful sequence in my eyes where you literally see the trees being consumed by Morgoth, and this is the aftermath, pure darkness in Valinor. What Galadriel also says is that after this point, basically, um, there will be war, and that before that, they knew no death, which is also not true, because Morgoth started to corrupt the elves and inflict horror upon them as soon as he found out that they awoke, and as soon as he had found them after creating them. So then he basically started terrorizing the elves, so they knew death, they knew despair, and they knew horror. But this is, of course, something of an entirely different level when just the light goes out. Then we see the Oath of Feanor, presumably, um, and in this show apparently Finrod is also part of this oath, which was actually only sworn by the seven sons of Feanor, but as Finrod is basically one of the elven royalty in Valinor, well, it's yeah, it's okay that they include him in a sort of oath because we don't know if it's the oath of Feanor or not. It's just, elven leaders who swear to go to war. So if it was portrayed as the oath of Feanor, it would be a problem, but in this case it's not really specified, so um, they just go with it. And I mean, the scene looks cool, but yeah, it's weird to see Finrod there. And then the elves go to war with a fleet, a massive fleet, going to, seemingly the burning Middle Earth. So we don't see anything of the first kinslaying, where the host of Feanor attacked the Teleri and stole their ships, and the host of Fingolfin actually helped the host of Feanor kill the Teleri elves because um, they misunderstood the situation and thought that the Teleri attacked the Noldor, which wasn't the case. And basically, then Feanor goes off with his ships and leaves the host of Fingolfin stranded in Alqualonde between their slaughtered kinsmen of the Teleri and forces them to go through the north over the Helcaraxe to Middle Earth. and on the Helcaraxia or the Grinding Ice, they basically lose a lot of their troops and their members, which increases the wrath and the hate against the hosts of Feanor. But all of this isn't shown because it isn't an appendices. So anyway, we go to war. And this is also a really cool shot. I think it's from the War of Wrath, where in the books the eagles help um, with Eärendil to slay the dragons, including Ancalagon the Black, the greatest dragon who ever lived in Middle Earth. But this seems to be a generic battle because Galadriel narrates that it is um, just a battle in centuries of war, and the War of Wrath was actually the final conflict at the end of the First Age in which Morgoth was overthrown, and that's the battle where the Eagles participated in, and they basically never participated in any of the real great battles that also occurred in the First Age, but they helped, rescue um, several people from the clutches of Morgoth. So I think it's the War of Wrath, but they make it clear that they don't understand that it's the end of the First Age, and that basically then the host of Morgoth is defeated. This is also a really beautiful shot of the sinking of Beleriand and basically the breaking of that whole western section of the continent and let it sink into the sea. It's a really nice shot with all the dead people just still floating around in the water, and Galadriel standing alone on the field of battle with the helmet of one of the fallen elves just in her hand. It also shows the destruction and people just walking around, sometimes aimlessly comforting each other, taking some wounded and dead of the battlefield. It's also a nice scene in my eyes, and it creates a bit of empathy for Galadriel in this case, not when she was hitting the other kids, but this creates a bit of empathy. We get our first view of Sauron as well. It's really a nice costume, but at this point, at the end of the First Age, Sauron um, was basically scared of the host of the West, and he fled to the east of Middle Earth, and he did, some things there that nobody knows anything of. So it's possible that he also already started multiplying orcs, but in this case, it's portrayed as Sauron creating more and more orcs. Still in the First Stage, that this battle is still going on against Morgoth, um, which should have ended at the War of Wrath with the scene with the eagles. And then we get a picture of Galadriel and Finrod. Galadriel saying that Finrod took it upon him to hunt down Sauron, but that Sauron found him first. What happened in the Silmarillion is that Finrod goes to Tar Ingauloth, which is the Isle of Werewolves, where he is captured by Sauron alongside Beren, and they go there to retrieve one of the Silmarils, and Finrod actually slays one of the werewolves who comes for Beren, but he dies of the wounds, which you can see here. You can see the claw marks of the werewolf. So it is a nice touch, and it is an indication that they have actually sometimes read the books and took out some nice bits that they thought would create more empathy or would give a bit more of the backstory. So generally, most of these exposition scenes, are actually good scenes. So the first part with Galadriel being bullied was completely unnecessary, but those other short scenes showing the history in the First Stage were actually nicely brought in terms of a visual, in terms of visuals and effects. And then we go to the actual story where Galadriel is now leading a company of elves to hunt down orcs, apparently there are many other companies hunting down orcs, and Galadriel is of course the best of her group. Here we see her companions who just climbed a patch of the wall of Game of Thrones to get to a plateau, but they see of course that Galadriel is already far ahead because she's so strong and she doesn't wait for others, even though she is the commander and she should be there guiding her troops or giving them instructions, not just randomly climbing up a mountain. It shows that Galadriel is just focused on her own targets and not on the benefits for the group. We see this again when there's one of the elves who basically almost succumbs to the snowstorm because she doesn't want to listen to her second in command who said that they should turn back. No, she says, we gotta go on. And then they go into a snowstorm and this guy falls down and probably almost died until one of the elves literally screams at Galadriel to stop, and then she angrily turns around and gives him a cloak, and all is well again. But also a really great thing for Galadriel is when her second in command says we should stop and we should turn back because we should have been here already at your target. Galadriel says we're already here, which is of course illuminated by a nice convenient lightning bolt showing some angry looking ruins. And in these ruins we find Han Solo, who is still there after the events of Star Wars, and hasn't been freed apparently, and he's also turned into an orc. Maybe Jabba the Hutt is there somewhere as well, I don't know. Yeah, it just looks really, really cheap. And Galadriel says, of course, that these orcs have been meddling with the magic of the unseen world. Scary stuff if you turn into Han Solo. And of course, she's also smart enough to see a mark that's literally no one else sees, which she uncovers with some water that immediately freezes over. I mean, this area is so cold, according to her, because it's so evil that even the warmth of the torches doesn't reach them. And when one of the elves in her company says that his hands are like ice cold, that the warmth doesn't touch them, she literally says this, that I mean, it's cold because this place is evil. And I'm more like, no, it's cold because his hands are freezing off. They've just been in a snowstorm, getting frostbite all over. I mean, it's normal that you don't feel this immediately warm feeling when you hold your hand close to a torch. So yeah, but apparently cold is evil as well. And there's a snow troll. Apparently nobody noticed. There was nobody doing reconnaissance in this area. Apparently one dude who screams and runs away, and then gets killed together with some other elves, because the snow troll basically throws a big chunk of ice at them. Galadriel is there, luckily, to do her sword jump, and then continues to slaughter the snow troll on her own without any help of the other elves, who just stand there basically and do nothing. They just admire Galadriel, and Galadriel is great. It's a nice fight sequence, but it's basically really dumb that the other elves aren't there, to stab at it or to shoot arrows at it. It's not like the cave troll fight in the Fellowship of the Ring, where they all together attack the troll and shoot arrows at it and all of that. It's just Galadriel showing how powerful she is with her sword jump and fancy moves, while the other elves are standing there like a bunch of statues. So after this very nice sequence of action, we get the introduction to the harfoots and the elf people, all of whom have terrible Irish accents and are dressed in rags and lumps and with dirt in their face and twigs in their hair. It's really not the most clean bunch. And then after berry picking, there is a track, or a footsie as one of the kids calls it. And Nori of course realizes immediately that this is from a wolf. It doesn't really look like a wolf. I don't know what it is, maybe it's a warg, because we see it at the end of this scene. We see it looking at the kids angrily, and a bit of there's a bit of sniffing going on. So it could be a warg, it could be a werewolf, it could be Sauron as a werewolf, going after harfoots because he knows that in the trilogy um, there are hobbits who will thwart him, so maybe he is already starting to hunt down um, what Amazon calls prehistoric hobbits. Back in London, we have Elrond and Galadriel staring at the painting and, you know, talking a bit about Galadriel's insolence. And this is really a good scene because Galadriel is basically um, an arrogant twat. And Elrond is like, I mean, just stop your insolence and listen to the High King and do as you're told for once because you're constantly exceeding your limits for what you can do. And Elrond is right because when a king gives you an order to do something, you do it. And I mean, she pushes her luck constantly, and that's when Elrond also says, you know, just behave yourself at the ceremony that will follow, and I'll give you an audience to the High King. And then we get the ceremony where all the elves are basically getting an award for fighting orcs and are granted passage to Valinor in one of the ships departing the Grey Havens. And to be fair, the portrayal of Gilgalad by Benjamin Walker is actually quite decent. He's one of the only elves who actually um, feels like an elf. I mean, he kind of brings a serenity to it. It's, you know, it's more a feeling of grandeur. Um, I don't really get the true feeling of elves like I did in with the original trilogy, but it's at least more decent than some of the other elves. Um, and his acting is also quite decent. So after this, we get the scene where the famous scene now where Galadriel says, "You have not seen what I have seen." Upon which Elrond says, "I have seen plenty," and Galadriel answers, "You have not seen what I have seen." And thereafter, Elrond looks like this, looking like, "What?" I mean, seriously, I have seen my fair share of brutally murdered elves. I have seen kinslaying. I've been in battles. Yeah, apparently it's not good enough for Galadriel because what she has seen is far worse than Elrond has ever seen. It's basically like a competition of who has seen the worst things. Now we get to the humans in the Southlands, east of Mordor. Um, Also, all people who are dressed in lumps with weird horns on their heads sometimes, and apparently led by a half-naked dude. Um, we see Arondir, who is trying to be a serene elf and actually manages to bring that to the screen at some points. This serene feeling, this calmness. His reflexes are also good, and he is being bullied by one of those uh, pesky kids, also dragged in lumps, who doesn't want a drink and throws it to the ground. Upon which the barkeep just wants to hit that kid, and Arondir catches his arm. Um, it's a fun scene. It's useless because it's just, I mean, it's there for no reason. It seems just to establish that Arondir um, goes to this village, a village that doesn't exist and that serves no purpose in the original story, but it's just specially created for the show to, I mean, I don't know why, to show that these people are still evil, even after thousands of years after Morgoth is defeated. We also get the first look at Bronwyn and Arondir's romance, which is really, it's quite still. It's bland. There's really not much emotion going on. Um, she just gives him some flower seeds, and he doesn't really seem very impressed with it. Even though she went to great lengths to get it from another healer, but apparently it's not really good enough for him as an elf. Um, and it's just like, I mean, it's a weird feeling um, in this scene, and in all those scenes between Bronwyn and Arondir from here on out. um, yeah, there's like this awkwardness. There's not really like a feeling that these people are um, in a relationship or in love with each other. We also get Arondir being bullied by another elf, another of his um, watcher friends, who basically says that there's only been two times that there was a union between a man and an elf, and in both cases, a female elf and a male man, a human. The first case it was Tuor and Idril. Well, actually, the second case and the first case is Beren and Luthien, and Idril was granddaughter of Luthien, and she went on with Tuor. So those are basically the two elf-human relationships that have been there in the past. So um, maybe this will be the fourth, and then we get Aragorn and Arwen in the third age, um, which would, yeah, I know it's not necessary. And there's a lot of things in the show that are just there. They're not really necessary to be there. But anyway, let's go on. So the Watch Warden says to Arondir that it's time to go home, and that these people are just still evil. They are, I mean, they don't change. Apparently, people don't change after 1,000 years, so they are still under the influence of Morgoth and of evil, which is a ridiculous notion. Um, um, just apparently portrays every one of the elves as just high and mighty elves, while Arondir just sees the good and is actually the good guy in this case. Um, I mean, he's being bullied. All the main characters seem to be bullied by some person or the other, and I don't know. They want to give us this feeling that to create more sympathy because they are bullied and because people don't see their opinions as valuable, but mostly their opinions are either unreasonable or the other guys are just made stupid or arrogant for no reason. Because the Watch Warden would also know that not all these people are evil, and that it's not because their ancestors did something thousands years before that these people are the same. I mean, he would be just an idiot for thinking that, but apparently he is an idiot. And then we get Theo, who is being a brat, and annoyed that Arondir just shows up at the house. He's also annoyed at the mice who are scratching under the floorboards, and this will be important in the second episode. But yeah, basically he's just being like a teenage kid, um, and looking at his mother like, I mean, I've been doing this stuff like grinding herbs. Can I do something else? I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. Is that feeling that I get from this. And then we get the Black Goo, which is basically a very lucky scene because Arondir comes knocking and Bronwyn opens, but at the same time a farmer knocks on the door on the other side of the house, and Arondir and Bronwyn go there. So luckily, Arondir is there to be smart enough to milk the cow or try to milk the cow. I don't know why. That would be his first thought. And there's this black goo that comes out, and I expected him to turn into venom, but it didn't happen. So it's just random black goo, like black milk, or I don't know. It's like this essence of evil that it should portray. But I mean, basically now it's just black goo. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't burn his hands or turn the ground barren. It's just black goo. It doesn't even really hurt the cow. So yeah, it's just black milk basically. And in the meantime, Theo and his annoying friend from the bar um, are there to find a sword in the barn that Theo found. And basically it's a sword with a mark of Sauron, which is, I mean, it's a nice scene where the this sign lights up, and then Theo sees this sign and like this more evil thing, the essence or the presence of Sauron that he feels. It's a nice scene, but I mean, how does the sword get there? It's not really explained. And this other dude is basically saying that, bantering Theo, saying that his dad ran off, and all that. It's not really necessary as well in this scene, but it gives an exposition and is basically just there to give a background for Theo, and for no actual reason. Um, then also to show that this guy is really annoying. Now we get our scene where Galadriel and the other elves, from the award ceremony, are on a ship to Valinor. It's nice. I mean, it's clearly a motor-driven boat, um, and not really driven by that one sail. But anyway, I mean, it's nice that they're just standing there still, um, like statues, looking forward to the straight road to Valinor. We go back to London, where we get our first look at, Celebrimbor, who will take Elrond to his realm in Eregion to help him with a secret project. I wonder what that would be. I mean, it's Rings of Power and Celebrimbor made ring, but what would the secret project be? So basically, Gilgalad sends off his herald, um, with Celebrimbor nowadays. It's, I mean, it's a bland scene, really. It's not really uh, worth talking about in terms of dialogue or visuals. I mean, Celebrimbor is just there in a long velvet robe, and I mean, that's basically it. He's just a guy in a velvet robe. Um, Nothing more. It's not really distinctive for an artisan, or a master craftsman. He's just like another dude. And then we get back to the harfoots because they are so interesting. So far, they've literally done nothing. Here we see, Lenny Henry saying that Nori is an uh, is an annoying kid, always sticking her nose into other people's business, um, and just being like a weird kid. Just not doing what she's told and all that. But she's basically standing there like, yeah, I know, I'm insolent, so what? I do what I want. Lenny Henry is basically just there. I mean, um, he has to do like a lot of overacting, like, sniffing in the air and being like, you know, using over the top hand gestures and snapping his fingers and with a fake Irish accent. I mean, they all speak as if they're from a 1920s American show about Irish people, and the Americans just, you know, use the most basic stereotypical Irish accents they could find. So I mean, it's really annoying. Just speak English, or just, I mean, use a relatively bland English accent, like just a general English accent. For example, what they did in The Lord of the Rings, basically everyone sounded the same apart from Gimli. He's the only one who had like a slight pronunciation of the R, and he used some words that might be more Scottish sounding, but he never sounded Scottish at all. He sounded English with just more articulation at some points. But this is just fake Irish accents all over the place, and it's annoying. We get back to Arondir and Bronwyn, who just went out on their little trip to a village in the Southlands, and they found out that the whole village has been burned out. I wonder what could have caused this. Maybe the black goo, maybe not. We don't know. Maybe orcs. We don't know. Maybe that's for later. See second episode, and then we will see some more stuff about this town. But basically, yeah, it's just burned down. And Bronwyn said that there were nice people living there. Um, and Arondir was like, I mean, yeah, these people serve Morgoth. And Bronwyn wasn't very happy about that, but now she sees that the whole village is burned down, and Arondir is a bit sad with her. But it's also a kind of bland scene. It just shows a burnt down village and destroyed stuff. Nothing more, really, but that's for the second episode. On the ship to Valinor, in the meantime, Galadriel is very reluctant to leave the dagger of Finrod behind on the ship. I mean, everyone else is undressed. I mean, they were there in their armor, so I'm wondering why they just didn't leave the armor there in London, where other elves could have used it, but apparently it's needed for on the ships to Valinor. But she's very reluctant to leave this dagger because, of course, she will stay in Middle Earth, as we have seen. Um, she won't depart to Valinor. Now we see our big comet. Gilgalad looks at it. The Ents look at it. Lenny Henry looks at it. Um, Celebrimbor and Elrond look at it. Um, and this is, of course, a comet with the stranger. And everyone just looks at it. Everyone would look at it. It's quite normal, but it's also, if one person has seen this, it's enough. But it's basically to show that everyone in the world in Middle Earth has seen this comet. And on the way to Valinor, Galadriel has just jumped ship and she sees the straight road close before her while she's, just floating in the sundering seas with her dagger. And yeah, basically that's it for her. She has to stay now. And the ship with all her friends or her company or the elves at the award ceremony, they're gone and they're not coming back. So now she is terribly alone because of her own decision. In London, we get Gilgalad, who finds a leaf with the Black Goo and notices that not all is well in the world of Middle Earth and that maybe Galadriel was right. Of course she would be, she's always right. And at the end of the episode, we get comment with the stranger. So basically, that's it for the story. Which, I mean, the elven parts are decent in terms of acting, in terms of language used, not the dialogue. The dialogue is really terrible at some points. It's sometimes it's decent, sometimes it's good, but most of the time it's just either bad or bland. The acting is often really bland. It's the same over and over again. I mean, they try to get the harfoots in there at some points, destroying the pace of the episode, and showing that there's a bit of comedy there, but it doesn't really work. The scenes with the harfoots aren't really funny or enjoyable. They're just really bland, and the music doesn't help. It doesn't help the environment. It's just generic fantasy music, and I really thought that the music or the soundtrack would be better because Bear McCreary worked on it, John Howard worked on it, but apparently it's just bland fantasy music, and the music they used for the harfoots, I'm sure I've heard it before in another generic fantasy show, but I don't know in which, because it's so generic that you could put it in any show. And also the costumes, I mean, they're just bland. The elves are just looking all the same. There's no real distinction. I get that that's useful for an army and for the soldiers. It's understandable, but I mean, there's not so much thought. There are just long robes. There are no things that could really discern these different people that you could say like, this robe is from Elrond, this robe is from Galadriel. They could have been wearing each other's robes and you wouldn't notice. The only costume that stands out a bit is the one from Gilgalad, but it looks really fake. It doesn't look real. It has like this fake gold cloak, like these golden bands on his chest. It doesn't look good. The armor looks really uncomfortable, um, and this goes on in the second episode, where we will see the dwarves. But in this case, the elven armor looks really. It doesn't look comfortable with those high neck guards and all that. I mean, you need to be able to move freely, and like they used chainmail dresses in her company when they fought the snow troll, but these were really uncomfortably long male dresses, and it's just not really useful. It would be annoying. I mean, you would trip over those chainmail dresses, and then you would fall flat on your face before a snow troll and get your skull crushed. Um, and like the harfoots are dressed in lumps. The men are dressed in lumps. They're dirty and they're foul. They're arrogant. Um, I mean, it's just generically made. It's all the same. It feels like the Wheel of Time in terms of costumes. Everybody looked like in lumps or in rags. I mean, they didn't really spend much thought in it, in terms of the costumes, in terms of the music, even in terms of the story. I mean, it's it's bland. It's not really entertaining. There are some good bits in it, mainly the prequel shots, with the War of Wrath and with the eagles, with the dragons, the sinking of Balerion. They were really well made shots and really good to establish, the the history. But for the rest, it feels generic. It feels the same over and over again. Um, so yeah, $1 billion for this. I mean, maybe it gets better, but I don't have high hopes for it. Um, as I said, like there are some good bits. Benjamin Walker is actually quite decent as an actor in this case, um, or even good, I would say, for now. But the rest is just either using fake Irish accents and being annoying, or just being very bland. Yeah, it's not really a show worth uh, $1 billion at this point. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and see you guys in the next one.